This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Love this podcast? Support this show through the Acast supporter feature. It's up to you how much you give, and there's no regular commitment. Just hit the link in the show description to support now.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See detail.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
This is Writers on Film, the only podcast dedicated to books on cinema. Hello everybody and welcome to Writers on Film. My name is John Bleasdale. I'm a writer and film critic, and today I'm delighted to be talking to Jason Solomons, who is someone who I met, I think the first time we ever met Jason was at Venice Film Festival all those years ago.
Yeah, it was definitely in a restaurant, or outside a restaurant. In fact, I remember exactly where it was, on Sandra Gallo. I don't know what you were eating. I can't remember that much.
Well, I remember coming up to you as kind of a fan, because I was a listener of your Film Weekly podcast back in the day. When was that running?
Wow, it ran for 5 years. It was the first film podcast in the UK, really. Guardian Film Weekly, we called it, and it started in the Guardian old building. So that which was in Clerkenwell before they'd even moved to King's Place. So it's like 2006. And then it ran when we moved into King's Place with the Flash Studios. We didn't even have a studio really to do it in when they started the podcast. When I started the podcast, with my friend Paul Noble, who now runs Spiritland, the sort of listening clubs which are expanding. So he's moved into that audio world. But he was the first producer on it, and we put it together in his bedroom to start with. Which was in sort of North London, and then we managed to move into the Guardian. They sort of built a sort of makeshift studio in their crumbling old building in Farringdon, and we did a few episodes from there, and then they moved to King's Place where they are now, which had all bells and whistles studios where we could really come in and get guests in, and sort of became like a radio studio in there. And I didn't really know what podcasts were. I knew that we could start a podcast, and I pitched it to the then editor. And they were, yeah, we should have this. Although they didn't really have any other one. They had Football Weekly, so there were the two of us. There were
with James Richardson.
Who was obviously a sort of Italianate kind of expert. And there were and we were the first two podcasts, and now of course they've got a sort of whole podcast industry. But yes, Film Weekly. I think I did 5 years of that, and I struck up a relationship with Zan Brooks, who became my sort of co-critic on those. But we'd also have a big sort of star interview, and then a sort of, an interview with a documentary maker, or an interview with a sort of first-time British filmmaker. I tried to sort of balance the two sort of the happy and the happy sad nature, the BAFTA mask nature of film, and try and get it all in there on one weekly show.
Yeah, I always remember you had a roster of amazing talent in terms of your interviews, and then you were always promoting sort of also the little guy, so to speak.
Yeah, it was really important to do that because we were the Guardian, and although I didn't sort of try and reflect the whole Guardian as a whole, but it just became important for people to have their voices heard for the first time, I think, and get their thoughts straight. I would often have filmmakers on a little. Sometimes it was their first sort of audio interview, and they'd be literally finding their voice both on screen and off it at the same time. And I think that was really important, and it was important to sort of embed the podcast itself in the nascent film culture. It's all very well having, your big I mean, I would go to the Dorchester and do a junket with, Nicole Kidman or Rosamund Pike or whatever, but it was really important to sort of say, well, look, that's one side of film that's not really accessible to most people, and yet then there is this other side that actually, if you want to become a filmmaker or talk about film, there is this other side. And I'd have film authors on as well. I thought, to cover film culture in general, it was much bigger than just the blockbuster or even the sort of mid-market art house film that you saw every week. And I completely loved it. I have to say, it was sort of the highlight of my week. I had a show on Radio London at the same time on the BBC, and that was really about London. But with the Film Weekly, we'd go out to Sheffield, and we go up to Edinburgh, and we go to Cannes, and we do it from Venice, and it was a great time. Now I'm feeling a bit misty eyed about it.
Yeah, I was going to say, why did it have to end?
I mean, I don't really know why it had to end either. They completely just stopped it. And it was doing really well. We were the second top rated film. I don't know why they stopped it. I still don't know to this day why. When they said to me, "No, we're stopping it," and you're fired, I was like, "But why?
What have I done?"
I don't understand it. They went to a video. I know they went to video, which then they sort of crowded.
That explains it.
It was horrible though. But they had this crap video where they just put Peter Bradshaw, Catherine Shord, and someone else, and squished them up with one camera on this seat, and they all looked horrible. And I don't think it was. Well, it's not a success because it doesn't exist anymore. So yeah, that was a bit odd.
It's so funny that they have, as you say, the podcast landscape has exploded, and at exactly the point they exploded, they sort of stopped. Because I remember I subscribed to you guys, and I subscribed to maybe one or two American podcasts, and that was it. It wasn't like there were what there are now, which is thousands.
And as you know, it's hard to find a niche for it. And I think probably Guardian Film Week, if we did it now, we would have to be more niche. That was more of a, we'd review the films that were out that week as well, me and Zan. And I think that's because, we're all around the world and just slightly different release patterns. That probably is something that's gone out the window. And the more successful podcasts are like yours, which are, niche about writing and about that craft and that side of film, or Girls on Film, which Anna Smith does, which is very targeted on female filmmakers and that culture. Those tend to do well. So you would have to realign, I think, a bit now.
Yeah, work out what corner of the market you want to take part in. But I always thought that, and I remember saying this to you because I remember very clearly sort of coming up to you as an adoring fan and saying,
you could have adored more.
I should have adored to the editor of the Guardian, obviously, and sort of saying, "Oh, it was so good with you and Zan. You're just like a couple of buddies," and that sort of relaxed conversational style was something I definitely tried to aim for when I started this.
Yeah,
podcast.
no, I'm very glad to. I don't sit there spotting that influence, John, but I do. I think that's the right thing. It depends which presenter and which chemistry you have with your other critics, but I think that is the right way of doing it. And there was a sort of thing when podcasts started that they were more intimate than radio, and it was like being with your friends down the pub and having that conversation that you would after you see a movie. I hope it was a little bit more structured than that and not quite as drunken, but but yeah, I do think you need a way through to make it, because people haven't seen the movie yet half the time. I mean, I don't know if people do that, saving it until they've seen the movie, but they're unlikely to watch the 3 or 4 movies that you're talking about. So 2 or 3 of them will be I'm getting the tenor of that movie from this flavor of this conversation, so I can decide whether to go and see it or not.
Yeah, and I think that thing of podcasts is a little bit on the wane now, just because radio has come back big. There's a sense that if you're looking for those reviews, you'll maybe listen to your Commode Mayo rather than which obviously is also available as a podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, I think a bit less than a radio show, isn't it? I don't. When it was on 5 Live, I would tune in, but maybe I'm old fashioned. I would listen. The thing with podcasts, I'm actually a radio person. I mean, I love live radio. I love kind of linking to out of music and into the news, and then doing a session with a critic on air, live on air. So the slickness of live radio is something that I really miss with podcasts, and I think they have got tighter and more professional, as evidenced by this particular show.
Hey, stop being so kind. I mean, I remember when there was a podcast not so long ago, actually a long time ago, I should say, about 10 years ago, which actually was called something like Drunken Movie Critics or something. And it was, they made a point of drinking. And I remember listening to like 2 episodes and thinking, I've had enough of this.
You don't want that. That's it. The pub bore.
Too relaxed. It's way too relaxed, too conversational.
Yeah, and it can be like that, and radio can be as well. It needs a tight hand, and you need to produce it, and you need to you need to come very firmly through some kind of story when you're reviewing films. As you've got to sort of state the theme, and then do a bit of plot and maybe a clip, and then come out with some reviews. There's no point just sort of going, that it's just a mess otherwise.
Right, I'll take that as my cue. So before you give us some idea of the origin story of the Solomons. What was the before podcast situation? How did you get into film journalism?
I'm a journalist by trade. I trained as a journalist after university. I went to the City University, which is not far from where I still live in North London, in Islington, and trained as a periodical journalist, and then became the first ever graduate trainee at the Daily Express. So I started as going around all the departments on the Daily Express as a graduate trainee. I did 2 years, and I went. You just sort of did 6 months in every department, from the courts to politics to showbiz to sport to like ones that you could to features, and I went around them all and displayed, I would say, a certain affinity for the sports desk and the showbiz desk were my two, and the diary desk, to be honest. They were my sort of 3 areas where I sort of clearly fitted in a little bit better than the others. Although I thoroughly enjoyed doing like night shifts on the news desk. It was, extraordinary. It was still tabloid Fleet Street, even though we weren't in Fleet Street at the time, and that no one was, but that culture was still very much there, swearing and shouting and drinking. There was a pub for London. Most people would go to the pub. There was a pub in the building. They had its own pub, and so people still kind of went by that old Fleet Street tradition. So I definitely grew up in that, and I was a sports writer for 2 years. I covered Euro 96 as a football writer and absolutely loved it. And then because I was on my cycle, I moved back to the showbiz desk, and they said, "Oh gosh, we haven't got anyone to cover Cannes. Would you like to do it?" And I was like, "Yes, I will go to Cannes in 1970, please. I will." And they sent me there, and I literally just stopped doing football. Sort of Euro 96 was the flourishing of that, and then I went to Cannes. I was like, "This is like football, except it's warmer and the seats are comfortable, and and the people are slightly prettier, and this was it. It was like a World Cup of cinema." And I've seen Cannes. It's the only other place as a film critic you get to what football reporters will know as filing on the whistle. As soon as it's happened, it's like doing a first night review. Theatre critics get the same thing. That buzz of coming straight out and filing straight away. And I thought that was very similar. And there's a sort of brief history of film critics that have got sporting backgrounds. Derek Malcolm, the great Derek Malcolm, the late Derek Malcolm, who was at The Guardian. He was a horse racing correspondent and a jockey before he became a film critic. And he would always sort of say to me, I was a sports writer. I was a jockey, in fact. And you know what? I'm older than Philip French. Those were the 3 things you could guarantee he would say to you every single time.
I remember talking to him about people he'd interviewed, and I asked him who was the worst person he interviewed, and Harrison Ford, boring man, terribly boring.
He told a story. He was, God, 90, I think it was. It was his birthday. It was almost his last public appearance, and he told this story about the Venice Film Festival where he'd gone to interview John Ford. And he'd kind of gone up to John Ford's hotel in the Excelsior and knocked on the door because he'd been given this interview and he thought he should. And John Ford's wife opened the door and said, I'm terribly sorry. You'll have to come back a bit later because John's got a terrible case of food poisoning." And in the background from the toilet, Derek said he could hear John Ford say, it's okay. I can deal with 2 shits at once."
That's like a Barton Fink moment, isn't it?
It's going straight in the script, that one.
Oh, that's amazing. But just that idea as well, that connective tissue between sort of being in, I've interviewed people and they've talked about talking to Orson Welles, and it's sort of like by one remove, I'm almost, Joseph McBride, who I've had on the show, worked on the Orson Welles film that later came out, The Other Side of the Wind, and he was sort of...
Well, that literally The Other Side of the Wind in John Ford's toilet bowl in Venice. Now we're all connected.
It reminds me of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. Did you go in and collect a bit? Keep it in a jar.
Yeah. So I take that, I inherit the glamour of Derek Malcolm's experience there. So yes, and that was my first introduction to being a film correspondent, really. I wasn't a critic yet. I was actually filing stories and going around all the sort of, you'd go around the BBC office and Channel 4's Film 4's office and try and find what their slate was and file that story, more of the same from Channel 4, more filth from the Film 4 slate we can see. The BBC are doing Shakespeare, and we would do those stories. But I wanted to go and see the movies as well, and managed to get a big scoop out of Leonardo DiCaprio and little Gareth Bale. I ran into Gareth Bale right at the end of the fest. Not Gareth Bale, that's the footballer. Christian Bale.
Christian Bale, yeah.
Christian Bale.
I was going to say, what was he doing in Cannes?
Gareth Bale gets everywhere. Christian Bale. And I sort of ran into him on the beach at the end of a junket. I sort of just sat down. I said, "Oh, are you doing this American Psycho film or not?" Because I just read that Leonardo DiCaprio's doing it with Mary Henry. He went off on the biggest rant about that's my part. He can get his hands off. And I managed to file this sort of piece. The little British boy from Empire of the Sun taking on the world's biggest actor tells him hands off my American Psycho role, and got this spat going. And it was a front page story on the Daily Express on the Monday morning. And everyone was like, "How did you get a bloody front page out of the Cannes award ceremony on a bloody British tabloid?" So I obviously had a nose for it then, and then they made me their film critic thereafter, and that's how I became a film critic, John.
Oh, amazing. I do love that, because I've been writing some news stories recently for Variety rather than criticism. And I remember one of the Variety editors quite recently sort of had to calm me down because I was enjoying it so much. He said, John, nobody's shouting, stop the presses. Because I was going, oh, look, this little film has just changed the casting news. Quick, this is an exclusive. It's like, don't, John, calm down.
You do get... what I learned on that was festivalitis, in that you're sort of at these film festivals and you're there to cover the sort of ins and outs of it, and as a film unspools in competition, which one's going to win, and then you get caught up in the varieties of it all and start sort of filing these stories about casting and all of these little things, which I think that's when I first discovered that world of the trades and found it absolutely fascinating. And to take stories out of the trades and make them sort of big enough for British tabloid stories, or even broadsheet stories, is quite a skill, and it's not always there. I mean, you're in Italy, aren't you, John? And so sometimes there will be an Italian casting story that you can probably blow up into an international lead, just about, if it's got, I don't know, Scamacchio or someone big enough in it, or it's a Guadagnino story that you can just about sort of parlay. And so I actually realized the best way to cover that sort of thing was to have a diary column. So because I'd grown up on Ross Benson's diary in the Daily Express, which was the rival to what was his name, Dumpster as they called him, Nigel Dempster in the Mail. They were the two diary columns. I decided to do a film diary from Cannes, and I pitched that to the Observer and said, this is how to cover this festival, because we're missing all these little stories that are funny. And I pitched Trailer Trash, I called it, and they said yes. So, and that was born at Cannes in 1999, and I carried on doing that for 15 years or so for the Observer. So that was really where I sort of combined news and film criticism and this wider film culture that you sort of touch on with, what was going on with people writing about film and people starring in films and executives as well. And sort of how I got to know the film industry, not just as a critic, but as a sort of figure in it.
Yeah, and it's sort of like what the Americans would call inside baseball, I guess. It's that sort of, there's part of that, but as you say, you have to communicate it in some way which a general reader will go, oh, who's doing what?
I hope so. And we were on the arts pages on a Sunday. I was the film column on the side of Philip French's column. So, and because I was digestible, and Philip French was the doyen for me, and a superb film critic who delivered on Sunday the last words of the week. This film, what's the final verdict? Because you get reviews on a Thursday, you get reviews on a Friday, and some you get in the guide on a Saturday. But Philip on a Sunday would be like, no, this film is good or it's bad or whatever. Or he would never say that it's so crass. He would sort of set it in its context, its cultural context, its literary context, with its antecedents as a play or a radio play. But he was quite dense as a writer. So my trivial kind of newsy bits on the side were what people turned to first when they got the Observer, and it became sort of a bit comic. And I had a sort of persona that would be this sort of Zelig-like character that would pop up at film parties all over the place. Which was a blessed sort of existence to have. Actually,
it sounds like a lot of fun.
Enjoyed it. It was huge fun, and I hope it was respected as well. We'll talk a bit later. Now I'm sort of producing films, and people say, "Well, how do you know all these people in the film industry?" And it's basically from having done Trailer Trash and never been sued for it at all. Which is both, I suppose as a proper tabloid journalist, you would want the badge of having been sued a few times, having ruffled feathers. But I think I managed to do it without ever doing that, and that was never really my intention. Anyways, to give a flavour of what this amazing industry was internationally, and the British film industry as well, punching above its weight on the international scene.
Yeah, I mean, you're not really speaking truth to power as a sort of entertainment journalist. I mean, there might be some of that. There might be a huge story like.
Well, there was when Me Too came along, for example. You do it then, or if there was when there was the lottery scandal. Alexander Walker, a famous film critic here for the London Evening Standard, which ceased printing on Saturday, which would have him turning in his grave, I'm sure, as a weekly. He decided to, when the National Lottery came in and the British film funding landscape took a turn and became funded by the National Lottery, he took shares in one of the companies, and decided to hold the siphoning of funds, as he called it, to power, and would turn up at shareholders' meetings and sort of say, "Why are you making these terrible films with our money?" But it's still filmed. I wouldn't say it's a national scandal, although Janice Beard 45 words per minute is probably a scandal.
I mean, we're not French. We don't. I mean, the French have this wonderful thing of like, cinema is dead every 2 weeks. When we just don't care about it to that extent.
It's like, oh, cinema is on. I didn't know that. Exactly.
There's still a cinema.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I've wanted to get you on the podcast for ages is to talk about a book you wrote, which was a portrait of Woody Allen film by film, the timing of which was not, shall we say, perfect.
The first edition was perfect, to be honest.
Right.
I took time off. I was asked to write it, and I'd always thought, I was a well-known big Woody Allen fan, and ended up covering quite a lot of his stories in Trailer Trash. I had a sort of in with his team, and this was the period where he just about switched to start making movies here in
Right.
the UK, Match Point, for example. So I think I was maybe not the first, but one of the first to sort of have the inside skinny on Match Point, which starred Jonathan Rhys-Meyers and Emily Mortimer and amazing Scarlett Johansson. And everyone was like, "Oh my God, Woody's finally making a film in London." And I was on set for that, and I sort of covered it. And everyone expected him to make, Annie Hall in London, and it was going to be this great, neurotic, hilarious romantic comedy in London. And then he delivered something completely that wasn't that. And everyone said, "This is the worst film I've ever seen. It's just terrible." And it still splits Woody fans now.
I like that film. I think it's. I mean, it's a variation on Crimes and Misdemeanors, which he's made
Exactly.
several times.
Cassandra's
Dream as well, I think.
Well, yeah. Then he stayed here to make Cassandra. So there was Match Point. There was Scoop, which shot in the Observer's office where I was working with that as a sort of news place. Cassandra's Dream, and which was fairly terrible, really. He never quite got Britain, did he? And we've never quite forgiven him for that. And I think there's a lot of residual anger by British Woody Allen fans for him never really making a great Woody Allen film in our country. He could have come here. He didn't really get, I don't think he really gets Britain. He just liked that it's wet and cold. You Shall Meet a Perfect Stranger being the other British film.
Right. Yeah. Tall Dark Stranger, isn't it?
Yeah. And a great cast always, but Naomi Watts and people saying things that they don't say in London, like Emily Mortimer in Match Point going, "Oh, thank you. You know how much I love Woman in White." and it was just it just felt stilted, and he never really got our vernacular. And when he did Cassandra's Dream, for example, he sort of made a Mike Leigh film. He was always trying to pastiche other genres of film, which he's always done, to be honest. If he was he did interiors, he was pastiching Bergman very much, or if he did Another Woman, he would be trying to do Cassavetes and get Jenna Rowlands in it. But it sort of worked when he was not doing it, but with our British vernacular.
Which makes me wonder if people who are huge Cassavetes fans and know that vernacular, know it as natives, whether they have a similar reaction to those films. And we just watch them a little bit like we watch maybe a subtitled Japanese film, and I'm not entirely sure whether.
Well, I mean, one of the reasons I did the book because I was asked to do it by a publishing house who knew I was a big fan, and I'd watched his films all my life, and I've got to say that they were absolutely key to me discovering cinema. Certainly Annie Hall was a film that changed my life. I did a series when I was chairman of the Film Critics Circle here in London, called The Film That Changed My Life at the Barbican. And I got various critics to sort of come and introduce their film, and they said, well, you've got to do one just because you're organizing the season. And I did Annie Hall because it literally did change my life. It made me want to go to movie queues and never miss the start of a movie, and go out with someone called Annie Hall or someone very like that, and and live in a city and sort of be cultural and work in an artsy sort of space, and it made me understand love a bit. When you're a teenager, you watch it, you never really understand what love is, and I thought that Annie Hall did that, and it made me laugh like uncontrollably. And I just thought it was a genius piece of work. And I still say it's my favorite film, because we get asked that a lot as a film critic. What's your favorite film? And I always say Annie Hall. And there's been a period, like you sort of mentioned about the timing, where you kind of people say, oh, what, Woody Allen? You must be really creepy if Annie Hall's your favorite film. And I'm sticking with it. It's my story, and I'm sticking with it. It is my favorite film. It's probably the film, other than Airplane, that I've seen the most and that I can quote the most. And it had a profound effect on the way I see the world. And there's a Jewish connection. As a London Jew, you're not quite as immersed in the culture as the American Jews are. And Woody Allen seemed to be an out Jew. He was absolutely happy being Alvy Singer and making Jewish jokes, which was something I was very nervous about in London back in the well, it must have been talking the early 80s, late 80s. Still, and we still are nervous about making any jokes about it. It just comes back and forth all the time. But I thought his proud ownership of that dichotomy caught between the absurdity of the Holocaust and modern life and anti-Semitism, he sort of came up with a way of dealing with it for himself and on screen, and I thought that was and that's been key. So when I wrote the book, I thought, yes, I will go through each of his films, because I feel that they go in cycles, and there's the early funny films, and then there's the sort of deepening of the thought, and then there's that extraordinary period in the 80s when he was with Mia Farrow, where I just think he delivered sort of 5 masterpieces in a row that very few people managed to do. Billy Wilder sort of managed it, but not many people can sort of come up with that. Almodovar, maybe, when he was in that sort of All About My Mother, Bad Education period. They can do it. But very few are on the top of their game for so long. It became like a sports team. Everything he would deliver would be sort of brilliant and beautifully done. Purple Rose of Cairo and Hannah and her Sisters, Crimes and Misdemeanors. They're pretty much masterpieces all the way. And even the ones that are minor in that little run are Broadway Danny Rose, which is just, is a masterpiece as well, but of a different genre. Sometimes they're in black and white, sometimes they're in color. They've got jazz. He influenced my musical taste, and turned me on to jazz. He influenced, as I've told him, my aesthetic taste in the way that we love, that you can sort of, his characters love various sorts of people. They love women. They have strong male friendships with, say, Tony Roberts, for example. All of those I thought were beautifully done. So I thought to examine that in book form, film by film, was the only way to do it, because it's a sort of chronological biography. But is he putting himself on screen? Is he putting a character on screen that looks like him? I just thought the play between the meta and the real and the fiction and the truth are what's interesting in Woody Allen. And then, of course, it's become exactly what's tripped him up in this final furlong. So I did the first edition and it did really well. We had a great launch. Coincided with the opening. If anyone's been to London or is listening in London, they'll know the Picture House Central, which is a sort of great cinema now under the stewardship of Claire Binns, a sort of flagship art house London cinema. It opened about a week before my book came out. And so I said, oh, can I have the launch here in the new bar? And we did. We had the launch. We all drank Manhattans and we had a good launch and some celebs turned up. And it was great. It was brilliant. And that book sold really well to the point where it did well. And I toured it and I went to Cheltenham Literary Festival and we did the book launchy stuff with it. And I was commissioned for a second edition because Woody being Woody, he'd come up with about 3 other films that I needed to sort of do an addenda to. And I got to interview him at Cannes, a good half hour with him each time. And then for the second edition, interviewed him again. And just as that second edition was coming out, John, which I'd done a French edition for, and Julie Delpy had written the preface for, it was going really well. Then that was the day that Variety decided that Dylan decided to kind of come out with this whole accusation of him, and the book hadn't dealt with it really. It mentioned it, and it mentioned Sun Yi, of course, which I think is the scandal that still overshadows it all. And we mention it, but because it's not on film, it was my way of not really dealing with it. But they definitely have affected his work and they've affected his life now, these scandals, and I hadn't dealt with them in the book, and I wanted to pulp the second edition. I sort of said it's not really right to celebrate his work when this movement is going against him. And then then the world divided into those who defend Woody Allen and those who think he's the evil incarnate. And there's about 4 people that defend Woody Allen. And I was one of those, Hadley Freeman, myself, the wonderful Bob Widey, who made the great documentary, and Moses Farrow. And it sort of became like that. And you become almost a sort of raving lunatic if you start defending Woody. Well, he wasn't married to Mia and they lived on opposite sides of the park, and Sun Yi isn't his daughter. And yes, he's known her since she was 12 and took her out for dinner, and then he took her to ball. It all becomes a bit weird if you start defending him. And I've had to sort of distance myself from that, but I don't distance myself from my book at all, because everything I've written in that, and I do occasionally sit there rereading it going, oh my God, what have I said? Is there any... but they're almost critical responses to each film and each character in those films, and they still hold. However, if there were to be a third edition, it would probably have to be when he's no longer with us, and it would have to reflect on how that private life, which we think we know him because he's put on screen, and we think we know that Schlemiel Alvy Singer kind of useless character. But Woody Allen's made 55. You're not a sort of useless nebbish who can't kind of work the TV or learn how the can opener works. You're not. If you made 55 films, you're a completely thoroughly professional, clever person who's nothing like the characters he's put on screen.
What did you think of his memoir, the Apropos Nothing? I read that and I'm not sure if I read it or listened to it on audio. But
both are valid because it's extraordinary, John. You're right, because I think it's the most extraordinary audio book about film because he's narrating it.
Right.
And I think he's a different narrator to a reader. So I think you do have to read it and then listen to it because it's a performance. And many of us, people do audiobooks, do perform and play the characters, but he's reading himself out here. And it's extraordinary because it sort of chips along quite nicely at the start. It's like, oh, I had a wonderful time and I went up to the Catskills and I worked with Sid Caesar and it's all hilarious stuff about how they kind of learnt to write plays quickly, and you get why Woody is so able with jokes and so quick because he's had this kind of schooling in the Catskill School of Comedy. And then suddenly he goes, and then I met Mia Farrow. And then it just starts into this massive diatribe again, about a third of the way through against Mia. And it's nasty stuff. It's not very nice to read. It's unpleasant. The whole thing is terribly unpleasant when he starts sort of laying into Mia for her sort of craziness.
So when you had the interview with him, that one in Cannes, the things were already out before you interviewed him? Or...
No, well, the Sun Yi stuff was out.
Right.
And then the second time I interviewed him, that was when it was circling.
Right.
It was almost the day after he'd been. I think it was. I think the story broke in Hollywood Reporter, and they were banned from a lunch
Right.
that Woody was being awarded at, and then they stood outside and sort of said, How do you respond to these allegations, Woody?" And I think he left that lunch and came up to sort of the Carlton Hotel, and I was sort of next to interview him, so I was all a bit like, "What the hell's going on here? I've just literally through for this book. Are we in trouble here, Woody? What are we going to do? Off the record?"
Yeah.
And he went, "Oh, you've got nothing to worry about. It's fine." But whether that's a complete denial of it, I still don't know. Or he was just like, "Well, I can make this go away." So the
Mm.
other layer to it, John, is that then later the Kirby Dick documentary came out, the sort of 4-part HBO documentary, which came out in lockdown. So everyone was sort of sitting at home, and had to sort of watch this very, very powerful, completely biased documentary, but it was nevertheless very difficult to watch, and it cut to my heart to hear Woody. When I mentioned his thorough professionalism, as opposed to the kind of lovable sort of sleeper type Miles Monroe fool. Um, he's not that in this documentary. There are audio clips of him on the phone. Sort of, he sounds like one of his assassins. One of his killers. The sort of the figures that you get in Crimes and Misdemeanors or in Match Point. The sort of killer figures. He sounds a bit ruthless, which of course he has to be. Every artist has got ice in their heart in some way, and he clearly has to be. He writes films, he kind of casts people, he kind of moves on to the next thing, and you get a real sense of that in there. The charming Woody of the stand-up is gone, and then you realize how he must deal professionally with this weekly on a weekly basis. He's either writing or he's filming or he's thinking or he's casting, and that professionalism came through in this documentary, and the way he dealt with the awful allegations against him and Sun Yi that he'd gone through it, and was now grooming this child. Was really the gist of this documentary, and it hit hard. It made me sick to listen to it. It made me ill, and maybe I was more vested than others. I think if anyone was watching it would have felt that the world was swinging towards the sort of Me Too feeling, to sort of be a bloke kind of going against Me Too and sort of saying, no, it's fine. People should be grooming their daughters.
Calm down, everybody.
Yeah, this is nothing to see here. Move on. I mean, but most of my friends were women and are married to a woman. It's all a bit like, what am I going to do? So to say this is fine behavior. It wasn't fine behavior. And there was a reckoning to be had. And I sort of said, look, I have to distance myself from this. And I did manage to get an interview with Woody, because his films that weren't coming out anymore, but he was still popping up at San Sebastian with Rifkin's Festival, and these films don't come out in the UK at all.
Right.
They still do just about sneak out on DVD or somewhere, but in America, I think they can. In America, they're much more. You can do it city by city. You can come out in New York and come out in Chicago and LA, but sort of nowhere else. Whereas in the UK, no one wants them to come out. I couldn't even sell an interview with Woody Allen, unless it was like Woody Allen confesses to Jason Solomons that he absolutely is a paedophile. That's the only story anyone wants, and of course he's not going to do that, because do I believe he is one? But I don't believe he is one. I don't believe he's even ever really tried to molest a woman. There's no. The women I've interviewed for his books, none of them went, "Oh, he's creepy," and then everyone started going, "Oh, I'll never work with him again," says Rebecca Hall. "Oh, I wouldn't touch him with a barge pole," says whatever actor it is. And I always thought that those people were jumping on a bandwagon and not particularly thinking about it. So it was not in my. There was no profit in it for me, morally, financially, culturally, to start sort of saying, but Woody is innocent. Listen, and Hadley Freeman, who is a very adored friend and colleague, and I admire her writing completely. She has crusaded admirably through it and sort of kept supporting him. But she's not a film journalist. She doesn't have to go to festivals. She doesn't have to kind of face public who are convinced that this is the creepiest man in the world. And some of the vitriol reserved for Woody is almost worse because I suppose he's still defending it. But it's worse than Polanski and it's worse than Weinstein, and it feels, maybe it's me personally involved, but it feels it feels that there's more disappointment, and I think there's a lot of that is betrayal. A lot of people hooked their own persona to the Woody persona, especially New Yorkers. You know, that he defined them as a species, as a race, as a neurotic kind of culture, and then and they're like, oh, but really, oh, but all of that, there's a real sense of upset on that. With Weinstein, you know, it's fine. No one defined themselves by Harvey, apart from all the people that worked for him and sort of said yes and kind of organized his parties, all of that. Yes, but that's a very specific, it's not a cultural phenomenon that he became that was then enabled you, as you can do with film stars and film directors, almost identify yourself with their imprimatur that you see on screen. And I think we've done that with Woody so often and so long, from his stand-up routines that you learn off by heart and do the Moose sketch from the 60s to
throw out the gun, keep the kid.
Exactly. And they were key jokes for me. You know, even Annie Hall Starts is the key joke for him is the women at the Catskills with the food here is terrible, yes, and such small portions. It's a key joke, but the Moose joke is a key sketch for me, because not you might remember it, but the Moose who comes second in the fancy dress competition, he loses out to a couple called the Solomons who came dressed as a moose. So I always felt that he was talking slightly to me on that one. So I'm very identified with this kind of this man, but also I think his writing is elegant and supreme, and I just think the screenplays that he writes, even in the later films, which aren't.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Make another smart choice with Auto Quote Explorer to compare rates from multiple car insurance companies all at once. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
I think amazingly directed. The stories that he tells, the screenplays that he tells are very beautifully constructed, and there's always story. You know, you see a lot of films now, John, and I watch them and I think, oh, that was rather nice, but God, it's really run out of story with about half an hour to go, this movie. Where's it going? Woody's films never run out of story. They always, because he's a joke teller, they go beginning, middle, punchline. They have a purpose and a destination. So where his reputation goes, the destination of that remains to be seen, John.
Yeah, I mean, I feel very similar to you. I think one of the real struggles I have with Woody Allen is that it's almost like a Schrodinger's cat situation. Either he is guilty and he is a terrible person, etc., or he isn't, and it's almost like that has now become an unknowable thing. And I don't want to discount, the victim, but I also don't want to. I don't agree with the idea of always trust always believe the children, because children in the middle of a very, painful and tumultuous separation can be used.
Yeah, I mean, and if you start, you'll end up sounding like a raving lunatic, or a defense lawyer for Woody. Paid by the millions to be his defense lawyer, or his attack dogs, or his publicist Leslie Dart. You can be all of these things, and then that's when Natalie Portman goes on Oprah and sort of says, "Look, I believe Dylan." And you get the hashtags of I believe Dylan, and what upsets me most about Woody in these situations is that if someone accused me of these horrific crimes, you would do your utmost to disprove them in some way. And I think his utmost has been to hire private investigators or to kind of come up with PR or just to keep making movies and have celebrity friends defend you. Although there's a few, one of them is Alec Baldwin, who's obviously been through his own ringer. You've always got Diane Keaton, which is always your big age. You can bring on Diane Keaton and everyone goes, "Oh, Diane Keaton likes him." You know, she's class. You would do your utmost to disprove it in some way and be humble, and it would just he doesn't feel like he's destroyed by these things, and it would absolutely cripple me if someone was accusing me of doing what he did to his daughter in a woodshed or up by a train set, you know. And he does keep provoking. There's a film called Coup de Chance that he had at Venice, which is, as far as I'm aware, the last film he's made, which is entirely in French. And I rather liked it actually, but there's a scene in it in which the villain, the played by Melville Poupeau, he's a sort of, you know, he's having an affair and he wants to bump off his mistress, and he has a massive train set. He plays with this enormous train set, and like in his room, and it's almost like a joke, but this is a very intricately built train set. It's not like someone said, "Oh, can we just have a train set?" And Woody's sort of said, "Yes, can we spend quite a few £1,000 or francs or euros making this train set? And I'm going to show it quite a lot." And it's a key piece of evidence in the trial against him as whether the abuse that took place, which I'm unsure what it is, happened. She says she fixated on this train set that was in the loft of their summer house. Why would you? And Woody's had said, well, there wasn't a train set in there. And Moses said, no, that train set wasn't in there. It was somewhere else. Why would you make a film where the baddie plays with a train set? It's a bit provocative and a bit odd. And maybe I know too much. Ye know too much, as they used to say on Little Britain. And that scares me. So that, and if I was him, I would be just like, oh God, what can I do to disprove it? A bit like Jeremy Corbyn when they always said, oh, he's an anti-Semite. I never said, no, he can't be. He didn't actually go out of his way to prove that he wasn't one. And
that's a really good comparison. I mean, it's probably the first time Woody Allen and Jeremy Corbyn have been put in the same sentence. But
welcome to my North London world.
Yeah, but I've always thought that about Jeremy Corbyn. It was like, I didn't believe he was anti-Semite, but I also thought his communication strategy stank. I thought,
me too. Just
do an
interview down the road. I'm like, he can't be. He's always been quite nice. I mean, I've been on shows with him and I've had dinner with him, and I'm like, I don't believe he's an anti-Semite for an instant. But surely you can do better than just be quiet about it. Just prove that you're not.
Yeah,
I don't know. Come round to my house for Friday night or something.
It's almost like a contempt for the mass media. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna put myself in front of Oprah and have her open
and that's what Woody did. He sort of says, to imagine that I would choose this moment to become a career pedophile is anathema to me. So why would I choose that moment? You know, when in the divorce.
But that's not the. But
that's not the answer you want.
Yeah, that's a sociopathic answer. What would it gain me to suddenly be a pedophile? It's like, no, wait a second. That's not the first thing that it might damage my career. No, I see what you mean. Well, let's leave Woody behind. Although, I mean, I think it is a real sad case because I am very much like you in terms of my earliest film experiences were like watching a Woody Allen season on BBC Two and watching all of them one after the other.
Yeah. And when they used to do that, the same, they did Billy Wilder, they did Woody Allen, and I remember them like sort of around Christmas time. I said, that's why I'm staying up really late. My mum was like, I think you should go to bed. I'm like, no, I am watching Take the Money and Run.
Yeah, exactly. And they might even have two on, so you could watch, Take the Money, Run, and Sleeper. Or
Sleeper still has me in fits of giggles, and
Love and Death as well.
I sort of just distrust sci-fi because I think Sleeper sort of sends it up so magnificently that I can never quite watch sci-fis without thinking of the Orgasmatron and the doors and Max, the little dog who says, is he house trained or will he leave little batteries all over the place? It still makes me laugh. Very funny.
But yeah, I mean, that's even I love Love and Death where he's walking around. My father had a little piece of land and he carried it around with him wherever he went.
She goes, they say, oh, I overheard you. She was, I was praying. He said, I heard two voices. She says, I do both parts.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me you know, you were saying about the Polanski and the Weinstein. It reminds me most of Louis C.K. because there was that sense that you just have this intimate relationship with comedy that it seems to speak truth in a painful way, in a serious way, and it's that thing of you sort of go back over the jokes and you say, hang on a minute, were you actually hiding in plain sight there? So Louis C.K.'s stand-up is full of the most sort of disgusting sort of sexual things. And then you sort of think, yeah, but he's joking, he's saying the unsayable, but he's not. That's actually his kink. And so with Woody Allen, Love and Death being a good example, they go to confess to the priest, and the priest says the secret to happiness is 13-year-old girls, preferably sisters. And you're sort of like, now you watch it and you sort of go,
I know. And the same with Manhattan. The whole film,
yeah,
Manhattan seems to be sort of by that. So it's very hard to leave it behind because it's so formative, and it'd be such you know, it's like Chaplin. You know, these are sort of towering figures of cinema, the cinema that you and I spend a lot of time worshipping in front of the big
yeah.
screen, and the icons of that art form. Woody's definitely one of them, you know, and he's bound up intricately with the love of cinema, and people take his film recommendations and listen. But Woody's film recommendations are never actually that deep. They're fairly canonical, you know. He sort of likes John Ford and he likes, you know, Fellini. He doesn't really come up with, oh yes, you know, he doesn't come up with Jonas Mekas, and kind of, he's not particularly off the beaten track with his choices. Bergman, yes, you know, but I mean, I wouldn't have watched Bergman were it not for Woody Allen. I wouldn't have been turned on to him. So, and I probably wouldn't have listened to Henry James. I probably wouldn't have listened to jazz if it wasn't for Woody Allen. So there's a lot, and a lot to thank him for. And I think that sort of the some of his, you know, some of the work that he uses, some of the crafts people he uses. Gordon Willis, for example, cinematography, that the editing techniques that he's used are pretty groundbreaking. And the way he's managed to sort of get in the Great American Songbook and American musicals and all those references, they're steeped in cinema. So it's very hard to leave him behind if you're still a cinema fan. And people will still whisper like Woody Allen was a huge influence, you know, and Diane Keaton's performance in Annie Hall is still a huge influence on all romantic comedy. I mean, they're all rom-coms, which are having a resurgence. Really, you know, there's Taming of the Shrew, there's Pride and Prejudice, and then there's Annie Hall.
Yeah. And I mean, I remember watching When Harry Met Sally and just thinking, this is Annie Hall, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is just Annie Hall.
Ephron,
I mean, the structure and everything.
Nora Ephron will say, we did say those are it. And you're waiting for someone to come along and play with it again and break up that structure. I'm still waiting for it. It'd be great when someone comes along. Yes, you can have an anti-rom-com, can't you? But no one's really come up with anything better than a rom-com that actually works. And Annie Hall is an anti-rom-com because it's a failed romance. It's sort of going backwards over the way the romance failed, but it's still glorious and love happened even though it doesn't have a happy ending. In fact, Sigourney Weaver at the Venice that we were just at, the recent festival, they had a tribute to Sigourney Weaver. She won the Leone d'Or, the Golden Lion for lifetime stuff, whatever, for being Sigourney Weaver. And they had a little clip reel. And they showed her first ever screen appearance, which is at the end of Annie Hall. She is the woman that he comes out the cinema with. He'd taken to see Sorrow and the Pity, and he bumped into Annie coming out, and he's got this date, this willowy date. And I always knew from the credits that it was Sigourney Weaver, but because I'd only ever seen it on the telly or on my bad VHS, it took for me to see it when it was on the big screen that you could actually see that this was definitely Sigourney Weaver. And it was great to see it included in her clip reel at Venice this year.
Wow. So talking about you shifting towards, I mean, you're still writing, you write for the New European, you write for other publications, but you, in the last 2 or 3 years, have been moving into actually making films and producing films. Tell me about why did that transition come along?
I think, you know, I think as film critics, you sit there all the time, don't you? Kind of go, oh, he could have done that. Why didn't he do this? Why didn't he do that? And but for me, the normal transition from a film critic would be to the cinema route would be to filmmakers. You know, you think, oh, Godard and Chabrol and Romer, they were all sort of film critics and turned filmmakers. And I don't really know how to make a film in terms of, you know, pointing the camera and getting everyone on set and saying action. That never really occurred to me. I'd written a couple of scripts, as have you, John, as a writer. And then either someone buys them and says, yes, this is a fantastic thing, we should make a film of it, or it sits there in your drawer on your computer and it doesn't really exist unless you're sort of pushing it. During lockdown, I really missed what I love about my work as a film critic presenter, which was going into radio studios, having guests on, doing Q&As, live events, and having people on stage and really talking about film in front of people and with people. And I really missed it. It became online. The world is now online and we're a bit more used to it. But at the time, I really missed it. And I couldn't work out, almost a yearning, what it was that I was missing. And I went for a walk in my local park here in North London with a film producer, and I told her, I was, as distant as we could be. We sort of wandered around, and she said, "Oh, you're really missing the producer bit of it." And I was like, "Well, I'm not a producer." She went, "Oh God, Jason, you're such a film producer." I'm like, "Really? Am I?" She goes, "Oh yeah, you'd love it all." I said, "Well, really, but don't you just wander around with clipboards doing budgets and schedules?" She went, "No, no, no, no. You can originate the project. If you option a book, for example, then it's yours and you can see it through. You should do that." I was like, "That's a good idea. Why don't I do that? That's better than sitting on Zooms and not connecting with people." So I asked a publisher friend if he had a book. You have to decide, though, what films you're going to make, because you could just produce, oh, yeah, I could do comedies and sci-fis and space operas. Right. You have to really sort of work out what you would spend your time with. That was her only advice. And I thought, because I speak French and I'm sort of, obsessed with French film, but also British film, if there was Anglo-French projects, that might be somewhere where I could insert myself with a bit more expertise or élan than some other British producers. And I found a book called A Waiter in Paris by Edward Chisholm, and here it is. And I thought, when you write some film, John, and you think, oh, you read a book and you think, well, that'll make a great film. Why hasn't anyone made that into a film? I read it, and I saw the front cover, I thought, well, it looks like a film. And I opened it, I was like, well, this would be a great film. Well, someone should make this into a film. I'm going to make this into a film. And I knew that because it was a galley form, that the rights weren't available. And I just started from there. I thought, well, let me speak to this guy, Ed, because he's written a book that I would have loved to have written. I was a waiter in Paris myself very briefly in the 90s. He got Paris in a beautiful way. He got the harshness of it, the darkness of it, the cold of it, the cruelty of it. Rather than just the sort of romance of the food and everything. But it was all in there because he's this guy, this waiter that toggles between the behind the closed doors of the restaurant, the swing doors of the restaurant, into the white tablecloth world. And I thought, well, this is exactly, it's got social realism in it. It's got characters in it. It's got diversity in it. I thought it was an extraordinary tale, beautifully written. I thought, let's try and make this into a movie. And I'm still trying to do that. But I'm very close to it.
Yes, yeah, I was going to say it's been an odyssey, but you are, you've moved it much closer.
Yeah, one tries every one. What I went around was getting a lot of advice from the industry, which I've covered for many years and written about. Did they all think, you can bugger off, Solomons? You're not coming in here. You've been rude about us. We don't want you. The biggest thing was to get an affirmation from those gatekeepers that I was very welcome to try, and they thought my energy and my championing of whatever talents I've done over the last 30 years as a film critic would be very useful in the rooms. So I was overwhelmed by their sort of welcoming response rather than, like, you naff off, son. No, don't want you around here.
But you did a podcast. You did a podcast about it.
I sort of started a podcast called Meet the Producer, which I was meeting the producer, but also my audience would hopefully be meeting me as a nascent producer. See what I did there.
Yes.
And that was very useful as well. And I went around sort of learning, sort of step by step, getting advice, and it was very useful for me. And then I realized that actually most producers don't really know what they're doing necessarily. Each time is a different approach. I'm not saying they don't know what they're doing, as in they've got no clue, but they literally don't know what they're doing until the project throws up its own problems. It might need to be that it needs a great screenwriter. It might need that it needs to attach a great director for it to, or a great star. Usually all of those things. At the moment, it needs to be all of those things. But you might need to get finance first. You might need to attach finance at different times, different vehicles for different stars. There are numerous approaches, and everyone approaches each of their projects in a different way, almost starting from scratch both times. And I thought, what a load of nonsense, but it's absolutely true. And I also of course, I interviewed thousands of directors over the years, and they always came on my radio show or the podcast, and you'd say, "Well, when did you first, find out about this project?" And they go, "Oh, well, of course, Stephen Woolley brought it to me 8 years ago." And you think, 8 years? You idiot! What have you been spending 8 years on this film for? Not even any bloody good. It's like, that's just, and I just thought, well, I'm not going to do that. My co-presenter and me, Robert Elms, here at BBC London, we would whenever they'd say 8 years, we'd look at each other and go, "Oh my God, they're mad,"
Yeah.
When you deal with it as a film critic, you deal with 5 films a week, let's say 8 films a week, and you sort of do your piece, write it, and then they go away, and you're on to the next week's lot. You don't spend that long with a movie. Maybe you'll do a Q&A or an interview about it with the filmmaker, but your energies spend about 3 hours with the project. This is every second of the day. I mean, the book's in front of me now. I go to bed thinking about it. I wake up thinking about it. I have a shower thinking about it. I unload the dishwasher thinking, "Oh, that actress that I saw in that film, she'd be great," and it's all in my head. It doesn't exist in anyone else's head. No one else is lying awake at night. Maybe Ed Chisholm, the writer of the book, go, "Where's my bloody film you promised me?" But no one else is living with it like the producer lives with it, and it's all consuming. And I think it takes it's opened up a vein in my head or in my body somewhere of newfound creativity, newfound resilience, newfound patience that I didn't know I had. I mean, I had a meeting on Friday that I thought was going to be really great, and they would all say, "Yeah, we love it, Jace. Here's 10 million quid." Like, there was a little bit of me that thought that could happen, and it could have, but they didn't. They just went, "Yeah, let's see. Oh, not that director. Oh, not that. Oh, maybe. Oh, yeah, it needs to be this, needs to be that." And you go, "Oh, well." And actually, do I no? You have to have a very firm idea of what your project is, because you'll get told, "Oh, it can't be this, it can't be that. Oh, we need it to be romantic. Oh, we need it to be an adventure." It can go all of those ways, and somehow, somewhere, you need to be pretty firm as what it is. And then they say, "Well," I was with the director before who decided that he shouldn't be a waiter; he should be a barman in Paris. I was like, "What?" But the book's called A Waiter in Paris, and the waiter goes behind the scenes, and what the barman does. I mean, what?
Yeah, so, the barman's always at the front of house. I mean, it's a totally different experience.
And like chatting. Yeah, there's a great film about a barman in Paris to be made, but it's not this one. It's like, so I'm like to the director, "Well, go and make that one. If you want to write a film about a barman in Paris, do that." And there's the mixing drink, which is a very different metaphor. And you can listen to someone spilling their guts out at a bar, but this is not about work and the sort of precarity of the work situation. And a waiter in Paris is very much like a black cab driver in London. They're a sort of iconic representation of the soul of the city. They know the city. They have the tricks of the trade. They get tips. They go out at night. They get drunk. They're familiar figures in the city. They haunt the city like vampires. They're like Reservoir Dogs. They've got these sharp suits. If you go to Paris at 2 a.m, you'll see waiters. Now my eyes have been opened to it by the writer Ed. You see them everywhere having a fag, and he says you can recognize one, and they give each other nods as they pass in the street after service. And that's the world we're trying to capture. Now, it can be romantic. I find it incredibly romantic, but it's also hard-hitting and socially aware and almost Loachian in its kind of depiction of the sort of difficulties of youthful work and the black market of labor and the racial hierarchies behind the doors. I mean, it gets blacker and blacker. The waiters are all white. Then you open the kitchen doors, then they're sort of light brown skin, probably North African, Maghrebian. Then you get further back and it becomes Senegalese and Malian, and it gets blacker and blacker as you go towards the washer-uppers. Orwell chronicled it down that in Paris.
I was going to say, yeah, that's immediately sort of sprung to mind. I love the way as well you've jumped into your pitch.
Yeah,
it's second nature to you.
It's good though, right? People go, "Wow, that sounds good." You go, right, so now I've got to make that and find the team that will make that. And then you get people going, "Oh yeah, but we'll give you $100,000 development if you make it into a romantic comedy starring Harris Dickinson." And you're like, "Oh yeah, well, I probably will. I'll do that then." And then you waste 3 months going, "Hold on, but that's not really what this is."
And 100,000 isn't that much. That's like
not ultimate. I mean, it's more than I'm getting for this show, but it's
I'm giving you 101.
A platform. And then people say, come on,
101,000.
and you might get a show at the BBC out of
I'm
it.
giving you exposure.
You are. Thank you very much. You feel very exposed. No, what it is a test of how much you love the film or not, because now you're getting it flipped. Oh, you should make it TV. Flip it to TV, Jace. Make it six part. Oh, I've had offers to make it a TV. It should be a TV show. And probably in the current climate, that's where the money is, and that's where the speed of things is, and you get things made quicker. You do have to come up with 6 to 8 episodes, 3 of which will be complete waste of time and boring, but as all series are. But I don't. My muscle memory is from to be Gladwellian about it. I've had 15,000 hours of watching movies.
Right.
Whilst I've watched a lot of high-end telly, I watch it as an enjoyment. I watch it with my kids or my wife, and that's what I don't go to work when I'm watching TV. When I watch films, that I know what a film feels like and looks like, and this feels like a film to me, a good one, even a great one, and that's what I want to do. So, but all along the way as a producer, you get these different forks in the road almost every day, and you can decide really, just from the casting, if it's funny or not, or if you go with a director and they have a certain tone, an auteurish tone that people know, and once you pick a director that's known for a certain style, people go, oh right, it's going to be a da movie, say it's going to be a Woody Allen movie. Oh right, well that sort of dominates everything else, whatever the material is. And I think the material here is very strong, and that's what should dominate the story of that. But is there enough story in the memoir itself? We talked about story early on. He in the memoir, which is the memoir, he becomes a writer. And whilst that's a sort of tried and tested trope in many films, even Stand By Me, one of my favorite films about someone who becomes a writer from a formative experience, is that enough? Are people like, oh no, he's become a writer? Well, that's hardly the high stakes that you want. So you have to be very firm on what film you want and not deviate from it. And yet one deviates all the time because of a new trend in the market or what the market would expect. So I've had to, I said about going to Cannes and discovering the business of it, the market of it. Now my Cannes are very different to, they used to be, oh, I've got to see every film and work out who's going to win. Now I have to go to have meetings with sales agents and find out what the market wants and whether this film would sell in Germany. Oh yeah, we love Paris. Yes, this is going to be very good. But we also will have to have Paula Beer in it because we need a German star or something like that. And you say, well, Paula Beer is great. I'd love to be in my movie. So you come away with a different thing. But otherwise we can't. Or the Italians will go, oh, you got Riccardo Scamarcio in it. Fantastic. This will sell out. He sells out all cinemas in Italy in an instant. And you go, oh, brilliant. Great to know. You say, but I really like who's that young actor who was in the Eight Mountains? Luca.
Martinelli.
Yeah, him. You say, oh, I love him. They go, yeah, but he's not an international name. He's not worth anything. The value of people, and it becomes a different market. It becomes a different thing in your head. These actors that critics kind of go, oh, I love him. He's great, and you say, yeah, but he's not worth anything. You think that's awful.
I was very interested when I was one of my scripts was going through the thing, and I was presented with a list of actors who we were sending it out to as we were casting, and they showed me a printout of the A list that we were sending out to and the B list, and the names on the B list were shocking because you were thinking that's a really famous actress, and they were like, nope, she doesn't do anything. She's nothing in terms
doesn't do it. That's it. Doesn't do anything.
And we had like, I remember them saying, oh, so-and-so wants to do it, and so-and-so wants to do it, and so-and-so wants to do it. And I was like, these are all major actors. One of them was like a Game of Thrones star. And that. And it's just like, yeah, but we can't raise money off her. We can't raise financing off her,
and it's interesting that you mentioned Game of Thrones, because there's always a period where I'm sitting watching films, and there's a like maybe third lead, and you're thinking, who is that? I know. And they've either been in, usually in TV that I don't watch, like Game of Thrones or Downton Abbey, these hugely successful shows that mean that they have a currency somewhere. But right now, apparently, even if you're number one on Netflix trending globally, it doesn't mean you translate into art house audiences in Italy, Spain, France, America. They're untried. They're successful on telly. it's almost like people just want to say no most of the time. Like they just go, I'd rather sit here, say no to you. That's my job, is to say no. And I'm
Oh,
like,
I think that's absolutely true. I think that's absolutely true in publishing. I think it's true in film because ultimately it's a huge investment. And
yeah,
if you say yes to a huge investment that doesn't work out, you're much more guilty than if you say no to something that doesn't work out. You know, people laugh at the guy who turns down the Beatles, but that's his job. His job is to turn down stuff that he doesn't regard. He's going to be wrong every now and again, but
yes. And
know.
that's what you find when you go around, not necessarily the studios or the mini studios or the indies. Someone's job is to read something there, make sure they've read it, tell their boss yes, or we should have to punt on this, or no, so that at least they've read it and they said, well, we turned that down. We didn't think that was right for us. And at least they could get fired for saying no to the Beatles, for example. But at least they read it. So I'm learning that side of the business, and I always wondered, well, what do producers do all day? That's what they do, and it takes all day, and an email takes days to get responses to. As Woody says, it's worse than dog eat dog. It's dog doesn't answer another dog's phone.
Do you have more projects on your shingle, so to speak? I'm not sure if shingle's the right word, or slate. Yeah. You put your shingle out.
No, then... I think I am a shingle.
Oh, right. Okay.
My production company, such as it is, as you'll see, its offices, vast banks of
wow, you've got a corner office.
So I am an independent shingle, and yes, I do. You build up a slate. You're told that you have to build up a slate because you go into meetings and they say, well, what else you got? Well, we don't want that. We've got a Paris project. We've got something else. We've got a hilarious comedy with Anne Hathaway in Paris. So we can't have yours. And you're like, but it's really, mine's not hilarious comedy with Anne Hathaway. But nevertheless, there's only so much Paris that that particular place, that particular shingle can take. So you have to say, oh, but I tell you what I have got. If you are looking for this, you have to come up with, I've got a romantic comedy, I've got a period drama, and I've got, a sort of tough London sort of, music thing. So you have to have those things up your sleeve, even if you don't have them remotely financed or pitched. And then, so I've had people sort of say, are these just ideas you're coming up with now, Jason? And then and you say yes. And they go, oh, well, that's fine, because you don't have the funding. But yes, we love this five-a-side football drama that you've got. We love that. And you go, great. So then you should run home and kind of go, crikey, I better get a move on with that, getting that written, rather than the bloke I discussed it with a couple of months ago. So yes, I do have. So I have Waiter in Paris, which I would say is developing very much. I've got a great new script writer on it and a new director, which is all very exciting. Although I'm sure everyone will say, no, that's the wrong script writer and that's the wrong director and they are not worth anything. I have another project which I'm very, very excited about, with a great director, a great actress attached already, and a great idea and a co-producer on that. And those two are feeling very, very close to. Right. They're very, very far from fruition, but they feel very doable and very close and very realizable.
Yeah.
And that's what you do. You're just making stuff that doesn't exist on the screen, and you're taking it from nothing to from ions and plasma and kind of germs in the air, and kind of trying to get them to coalesce and get on the screen. Stardust. It is, and there's an ancient impresario in me that's absolutely loving that element of it. And I think it's inspiring and exciting and a whole new world. But people sort of say, well, why don't you come? Oh, God, you come back and be the film critic for this. And you're like, actually, there's not. I have sort of done it.
You've moved past that phase in your life.
I absolutely loved every single word and minute I spent watching films in order to be, to tell people about them and champion people's films on air every week and get excited about it as I'm getting excited to you. I'm no more excited about my own project than I would be about a film that I love, that I'm telling my audience to go and absolutely see on a Saturday night or a Friday night. I get that impassioned about it, or not to see equally. But I think the positivity of being a producer is really quite good, rather than the negative of being a studio executive and saying no to everything. Producers sort of say yes. Yes, we can. Yes, we must. Yes, we can make cinema great again.
Oh no, that's not. No.
I put my foot in it.
You were doing so well.
You do have to make cinema important and culturally relevant again, because I think it has lost its way a bit in terms of what audiences. I don't think the directors and the writers and the actors and all of that. I think they all love cinema still, but it's lost its way in terms of the cultural importance and the sort of mainstay of culture that it was. Whether that can ever get it back, I don't know, but it needs to realign itself with the modern rhythms and take its place. People don't go out to the cinema as much as they used to, sadly. But you need to give them a real reason to get off the sofa and go.
Sure, but
and what you do does, you write, hopefully your Malick book will inspire new generations to go and watch Malick films. Funny thing is talking to you, John. Whenever I did the Woody, and they said, "Well, he's done 50 films," and and you're slogging through watching another one of them, which was always a pleasure, I have to say. Anyway, but I always joked that next time if I was going to do one, I'd do Malick. Because you only have to see at that point. You'd only have to see that. I think you hadn't even come up with the two more recent ones. There was only like 4 or 5 that you needed to see, and they were all masterpieces. So it was great. So I joked that I'd do Malick, and there you go. You got in there.
I got in ahead of you.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about what you were saying about the cultural impact of cinema, and I was thinking, in a way, it still retains that in the sense that, Barbie and Oppenheimer and even this year's, Zone of Interest and Dune are much more impactful and lasting, I feel, than sort of anything that's been on
and
TV
they become
recently. I mean, if I think back to the last TV show that it was like Succession, which is like 1.5 years, 2 years ago, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, they can all. What TV now has is the ability to become vernacular and the point of conversation internationally. I think the COVID did that. When think back to those early days of COVID, everyone was talking about the Tiger King, weren't they? Which just feels like a long, long time ago.
Yeah.
But it sort of united everyone. Everyone's stayed inside watching the Tiger King. Now cinema used to be on the buses everywhere, so you'd have phrases that were cinema titles that became everyone's headlines, in newspapers or whatever. You still play with them, and I think that's where cinema's kind of losing it a bit, in that some of these films are sort of happening without people knowing about them. You're like, well, I didn't even see that one. I didn't see that one. I've not even heard of that film. Where's that gone? What happened to that? And you're like, that they're slipping through the cracks a bit too much for my liking, and you just don't want your project to be one of those. You want it to get made and you want it to be up there on the screen, but the life that it has now, it's possibly a week and then it will go to streaming anyway. So there's no point being that precious about, well, I don't want it to be a streamer. So cinema is almost a state of mind or an attitude, as much as it is a sort of end destination for your project. But yes, I'm still enthralled to the big screen and the hoopla of a cinema release, which I believe can really cut through and change lives. I'm not sure telly does that. I'm not sure that people go. I'm not sure there's a series of the TV that changed my life, the TV show that changed my life. Maybe there is, and maybe it's Kathy Come Home and 7 Up and all of these amazing documentaries that have been on telly. But I just think cinema has that ability to talk to you and reach to you and do what Woody did in The Purple Rose of Cairo, and just make you want to disappear into the screen and have that relationship with the story.
Absolutely. Oh, brilliant, Jason. It's been really fun talking to you, but I have one last question for you, and which is a recommended film book. We always ask our guests for a recommended film book. So what would you like to recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, I wish I could come up with something, extraordinary and off the beaten track. And you've talked about sort of becoming a producer, and I started reading film books that film students were. I didn't go to film school or anything like that. So I've started reading some books like John Yorke's Into the Woods, which is brilliant on script and structure, and that I really needed to understand. I think as a critic, you intuit and realize that you're sort of in the hands of a storyteller, but you don't quite know the mechanics of it. So John Yorke's Into the Woods has been quite formative. There's a book called Save the Cat by Blake Snyder, which is a really how to make a quite hit Hollywood movie, and that's been good to really find the heart of your movie from its tagline and pitch to its all the way through to its story. So they've been really instructive. But really, the one that I keep coming back to and I reread again is the William Goldman book, about Hollywood, where the phrase "nobody knows anything" comes from, and
Yes.
and I kept thinking, oh, that can't be true. Everyone knows that. It's true. It's true. Nobody knows anything, and that goes from me with my film, A Waiter in Paris. I don't really know when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen. The people I'm pitching it to don't really know, and then they tell you, oh, it's got to be a romantic comedy with Harris Dickinson in order to sell. I go, is it? Do you know that? And I don't think people know. So I think that William Goldman in that book, he really does sort of come up with like, well, Marathon Man, that was going to be nothing, and the sort of the level of of ignorance about the power of what's going to happen is extraordinary. And I speak to some investors now. I have to speak to sort of investors and kind of say, would you like to give me some money so I can continue this blessed life of worrying about films? They kind of go, well, it's a terribly inefficient industry, Jason. These are people who aren't film people, but have made their money in, I don't know, taxi firms and other investment opportunities. They've sold their business. All these people you read about, and they go, yeah, but the film it's a terribly inefficient business, and they kind of marvel at it. So what you could, property is a much better bet than film. I'm going, well, I'd rather invest in, 3 off-plan flats, thanks very much, because they're going to happen and people are going to live in them. And I know where they are and I know they're 3 bedrooms. Film, I've got no idea what you're going to turn up with or where it's going to be. And you could say, yeah, it's going to be at Cannes and you can come on the red carpet. It'd be brilliant. And you can meet Anne Hathaway, who's in the other film about Paris. And they go, oh, that'd be great. But ultimately, when's it going to be? It is an inefficient business. Oh, I thought you were with that director. Yeah, but we had a split. Really, he wasn't doing the film that we wanted to do. And then I've spent all this time and quite a bit of money, like with lawyers or whatever. It is an inefficient business. So to try and do it as efficiently as possible is my new jam. and I thought I'd turn to Goldman again, and I have it here, and I dip into it every now and then and just think, oh, well, but he had the same problems trying to get Marathon Man, which is one of the great scripts of all time. And the people didn't know what they're doing. And that's 50 years ago. Yeah. I'm not sure it's improved or got any more efficient since. So I go back to Goldman.
No, absolutely. I totally. He's a wonderful writer and wonderful.
Yeah, the writing is great as well. And you're like, yeah.
I love his. He gives a script to one director. I think it's George Roy Hill, and has George Roy Hill sort of critique his script. And I used that when I was writing a script. I sort of looked at that for advice, and it was George Roy Hill is absolutely amazing on sort of like, it's an achingly blue sky, and he's like, how do I film that? How do I film achingly beautiful blue sky?
No, I will sort of recommend it to. I mean, it's not depressing either. What I like about it is that it still remains upbeat. It paints a sort of depressing picture of trying to get these things made, but it's relentlessly upbeat about the sort of promise of it at the end. And I think that's where we have to be. We have to sort of travel. People say, oh, it's a great journey. We know when all those stars, they go, oh, we went on this journey. And you always think, oh, God, journey. It is a journey. I really have to say, it's like tortuous, arduous, but I don't find it. People say, oh, it's a nightmare. Others producers got such a nightmare. I'm not finding it a nightmare at all.
No.
And each little bit quite exciting and extraordinary. And I hope to write a book about it one day. In fact, I do have a publisher who's an agent, and he was very interested in it. He said, that's going to make a great book. That's going to be a good book. So I tell it on Writers on the Film. That's going to be a Writers on Film. That's going to be a great book, Jace. And then I said to him, oh, look, I've come back from Cannes and I've split up with my director. We're not going to have that anyway. Oh, brilliant. I went, no, it's terrible.
But that's a chapter in the book.
Much better chapter for the book. And I'm like, well, there's a silver lining.
That's amazing. Or maybe I'll come round and throw some sticks in the spokes to make the book even better.
Just to make the book better, so I can come on Writers on Film 5 years down the line.
Well, you definitely have an open invitation, let me put it that way. And
it's been a pleasure. I mean, congratulations on the series, John. I remember when you first tried to start, you were like, how do I do it? Do I need a microphone? Do I need a computer? I'm like, you're fine. 180 further on, I think you've got it.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Jason, for not only for appearing as a guest, but for all your help and advice. Because, you really have inspired this podcast. So cheers for that, Jason.
My pleasure, John.
there's one thing that my family and friends know me for, it's being an amazing gift giver. I owe it all to Celebrations Passport from 1-800-Flowers.com, my one-stop shopping site that has amazing gifts for every occasion. With Celebrations Passport, I get free shipping on thousands of amazing gifts. And the more gifts I give, the more perks and rewards I earn. To learn more and take your gift giving to the next level, visit 1-800-Flowers.com/ACAST. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/ACAST.
Cue the fireplace and your favorite fall movie. There's nothing better than a cozy evening at home with a glass of First Leaf wine. First Leaf is a personalized wine club that delivers right to your door. Sounds magical, right? They get to know your favorite tasting notes, which varietals you enjoy, and whether you prefer sweet or dry wines. So in every shipment, you get bottles tailored to your unique palate. Go to tryfirstleaf.com/fall to get your first 6 wines for just $44.95 with free shipping.
Every idea starts with a problem. Warby Parker's was simple. Glasses are too expensive. So they set out to change that. By designing glasses in-house and selling directly to customers, they're able to offer prescription eyewear that's expertly crafted and unexpectedly affordable. Warby Parker glasses are made from premium materials like impact-resistant polycarbonate and custom acetate. And they start at just $95, including prescription lenses. Get glasses made from the good stuff. Stop by a Warby Parker store near you.